A few years back, I was really into caving, or to give it its less common name, spelunking. I didn't think I'd be into it when I first tried it, as I'd have considered myself mildly claustrophobic, the kind of guy who always felt a little anxious zipping a sleeping bag up the whole way. But I don't know whether it just woke something up in me, or it was the rush of getting over a fear or something to that effect, but I took to it like a duck to water. You're somewhere you shouldn't be, exploring parts of the world that very few people see, relying on people, truly relying on them, to ensure your safety and theirs. It's a rush, that's for certain, but it's not without its dangers. So every year, my family and a few close friends head out to a national park or something along those lines to spend some time with nature. And one particular year, I managed to convince them to go to Mammoth Cave National Park over in Kentucky, which is home to more than 400 miles of passageways, making it the world's largest known cave system. The cave system is located within the Green River Valley, and its winding chambers, pools, and limestone labyrinths are equal parts beautiful and eerie. 10 different tours offer guests the opportunity to explore the decorated, historic, and dripstone areas. The cave complex is especially well known for its natural entrance and Gothic Avenue, a passageway filled with historic stone monuments and signatures from 19th century visitors. So that was just about enough history and photo ops for my mom and aunts. The river could provide hours of fishing for my dad and uncles, all while myself and my cousin could enjoy the caving there. All went well with the vacation, right up until the second to last day when my cousin and I decided to get a little too explorative during a visit to the caves. My cousin was fairly new to caving, so for the first few days, we didn't go too deep or too far. Last thing I wanted to do was freak him out before we'd even done anything worth writing home about. But as the week drew to a close, there was no way I was going home without finding something a little more extreme to traverse. So as we were heading back to civilization after an afternoon's caving, we found a slit just less than knee-high in the rock wall of a cavern. You had to get down on your stomach to fit into such a tight squeeze, but if you did, it led to a small crawl space that cut through the entire rock. After a few meters, I noticed that quartz was growing on the passageway's ceiling, and in the light of our headlamps, they glittered in a way that I can't even really describe in words. I mean, it's like something out of a fairy tale, a still from one of those weirder Jim Henson movies. It's just magical. So, we entered one at a time, given that the tunnel was only wide enough for one person. The old claustrophobic me would have thought this place was a living nightmare. For real, I'd have straight up had a panic attack and probably died of a heart attack before deprivation ever set in. Every single time you took a breath in some places, you'd feel the ceiling of the tunnel on your back. It was that narrow. But the new me just found it thrilling. Once you get it into your head that these things can't just up and collapse on you, you get this feeling of calm, and then one of exhilaration when you realize you're conquering your fears and going places other men dared not tread. The deeper inside the tunnel we went, the more incredible the scenery became. It was like a whole other tiny world, tucked away within the solid rock. But eventually, like most small, subterranean tunnels, it just kind of petered out. At one turn there was a dead end, the other was host to all kinds of stalactites and stalagmites. Those are those rock spike things you usually see on the roofs of caves, only you get them on the bottom too in most places. I'm checking out the stalls to see if there's a possibility of us twisting through them to get to the deeper sections of the tunnel when I hear my cousin whisper something behind me. Something that honestly made my blood run cold. He said he could feel water on his back. Something was dripping on him. As it turns out, while everyone was having a good old time outside, checking out the statues and whatnot, it had started to rain. Only, they neglected to tell us that, so thanks, guys. It's also worth noting that the tunnel we were in had sunk down into the rock for a little while before sort of flattening out at the bottom, and to save you all a little geology lecture, I'll get to the point. The tunnel we were in was filling up with water. Granted, it was filling up slowly, but the position we were in meant that only a few inches of water could effectively drown us. And that's a real bad position to be in if you don't own a pair of gills. Needless to say, we turned around as fast as we could, which took a long time when you factor in how narrow the tunnel was, then began the long, slow crawl back along the flat part of the tunnel. It was absolutely horrific. Still makes me shudder to think about. My biggest fear was that he'd just lock up, which scared people are prone to do during particularly grueling caving sessions. For some reason, the brain just decides it doesn't want to take the body any further, and that's that. They can be stuck down in the rock for hours before they're calm enough to keep going. I was terrified he'd just lock up, not move, and be the reason we both drowned down there, dying while our family laughed and joked in their marquee tents. But he didn't. That magnificent bastard kept his cool, relatively speaking anyway, and just pushed on. That doesn't mean it didn't get pretty close. It was horrendous feeling the water slowly rising around us, seeing little drops turn into trickles, each new one causing my heart rate to speed up and my adrenaline to surge. By the time the tunnel started to turn upward, back towards the main entrance, the water was almost up to my lips. Moving made these splashing noises, and both of our sets of clothes were completely soaked through. That little incident caused a ton of crap for the remaining 2 days. My aunt and uncle blamed me for almost getting my cousin killed, and they pretty much took it out on my parents for allowing me such a dumb hobby. We didn't go back into those caves at all, and to be honest, it took me a few months before I even thought about caving again. It hasn't put me off entirely, and I think it did me some good to become a little more safety conscious. But you can bet your ass that I check the weather before caving now, every single time, and if it even looks like it's going to rain, don't do it. It's just not worth losing your life over, no matter how amazing it is. This story isn't quite from a cave, but it is underground, so I suppose that's fairly similar. At my old high school, there were these maintenance tunnels that snaked for hundreds of meters underneath the building itself. There were the newly built ones, and then there were the old ones that the school didn't use anymore. My friend Katie and I found an entrance to the old tunnels in a classroom that had long since been abandoned. We had to break the lock on an old trapdoor, unscrew a round metal top layer, and lower ourselves into a square, dirty tunnel. The main tunnels were about 2 feet wide by maybe only 6 feet tall, with maybe a few inches of dirty, stagnant water flooding the bottom. Now these tunnels were very dark and very cold, with the utterly disgusting stench of stagnant water and old mold. It was gross, but we began exploring the tunnels a little more every day. One time, we were in there for maybe 20 minutes tops, when Katie almost passed out from the smell. At least, that's what I thought it was. Turns out there were some dangerous gases down there. What I found out later were methane sinks that were actually pretty dangerous to those without safety equipment. I had to pretty much drag her out. But the next time, we brought respiratory masks, waterproof footwear, and flashlights, then set about mapping out pretty much the entire system. All in all, we mapped out more than 700 feet of twisting, turning tunnels. It became something of an underground lair for us. They went up, down, and turned to the sides, so much so we had to use chalk to mark the walls so we could find our way back. After a particularly long expedition, maybe like 3 hours, we headed back to where we came in, only to find the opening was actually locked. We pushed and turned on the metal cover, becoming pretty frightened when we found it wouldn't budge. We were basically trapped inside, and realizing that did not feel good at all. We rushed through the tunnels, trying to open each of the 3 openings we had found over time. But not a single one of them would open. Any panic that had been simmering away before had now bubbled to the surface, and to say the least, we were completely freaking out. We ended up rushing down a tunnel we hadn't actually been down before, hoping it would lead us to an exit. After a while, I kept hearing noises behind us. I told Katie, who was crawling in front of me. We froze, turned off our flashlight, and listened. Sure enough, a steady splashing sound was actually following us. We just freaked out and started to make a run for it. Please bear in mind, we had absolutely no idea where we were going at this point. It was just pure blind panic. After what felt like an hour of frenzied dashing through the tunnels, tripping over pipes and scraping our knees, we emerged into a bigger room. We realized it wasn't a room, but sort of a down section of a much bigger room. As it turned out, there was someone doing maintenance down there with us. We hid behind some old metal stairs, and when the guy left for more tools, we scrambled up the stairs, out the door, and hid in the girls' locker rooms for the rest of the day. We never did find out who locked us down there or what that splashing noise was. But you can bet we never went into those tunnels again. I have been caving as a hobby for several years now. Nothing really supernaturally creepy ever happened during any of my caving events, but I have been in some dangerous situations which have either left me questioning my sanity or the sanity of those around me. So, I used to go caving with a group of people from a university club, but I had been out of university a few years and just been doing my own thing. Well, one weekend, my friend Josie and I decided we should go on a little trip to cave with these guys, to see how the old club was doing. The club that taught us how to cave, and we in turn taught the new guys when we were the old breed. So anyway, the trip is going according to plan, and Josie and I go off caving on our own. But one evening, we decide to join the whole group and cave with them in a tunnel system near our communal campsite. Now, at the time, it was raining a little, and I was beginning to feel uneasy about the whole thing, but to be honest, I never voiced my concerns and just went with it. Big mistake. And so it was that a large group of about 12 people arrived at this cave system, spending about 20 minutes checking their gear before entry. The particular cave system we were exploring is normally just a subterranean river on the inside, but it has a few levels of corridors that you can explore high above the water itself. The entrance is really tight, though, and requires you to climb down this tight pipe extremely cautiously, using only your feet to feel for stable footholds. There is absolutely no way to see what is below you, and basically if you lose your footing, there is a nasty fall that could leave you seriously injured if you fell victim to it. However, manage to keep your head together, and you'll be fine. So much of caving is winning the battle in your mind. So, anyways, we get to the cave, and the guys in the club are doing their thing. Josie and I are just the old, salty veterans coming along to relive the old college days. Once we're inside, we realize that there is this one younger girl who's got herself somehow stuck in the entrance at the very rear of the group. Turns out it was only her second caving trip ever, and for some reason, her buddies thought it would be a good idea to bring her into this one, even though she had panicked whilst in a much larger, easier cave system earlier in the week. So one of the team leaders stays behind to help the panicking girl calm down and get her to advance further into the cave, while the rest of us move deeper, down some of the long corridors before we can start exploring the cave properly. Then I asked one of the leaders of the group, a girl I had taught how to cave just a few years before, what time it was. To my absolute shock and horror, she straight up tells me she doesn't know because she's not wearing a watch. Shocked, I ask her how the hell she expects to know what time to leave the cave to be on time for the call-out. For those that don't know, the call-out is arguably the most important aspect of serious caving. It's where you let someone on the surface know, even if it's just a friend who's not even on the trip, exactly who is going to be present on a caving trip, as well as what time you plan on leaving. Without a call-out, if something goes wrong, no one will know you are missing for days or even weeks, and will then have potentially hundreds of caves to look over in the hopes of finding you. And in that time, it's entirely possible that you could have died of deprivation by that point. Remember, it takes just around 72 hours without water for a person's heart to just pack up and cease beating. Anyway, the leader of all these sweet innocent beginners tells me that she did not leave a call-out or bring any first aid kit or safety equipment. I'm literally furious that she's put us in this situation, but I hold my cool long enough because I don't want the others to panic, because to panic in a cave system is a straight-up death sentence on occasion. But still, I tell her quietly that I am now the call-out, and to be out of the cave by 1:30 p.m. I reluctantly give her my watch, trying not to snap and straight up call her reckless and dumb, before I start back towards the cave entrance. Back near the entranceway, the other leader guy was sitting with the girl who got stuck earlier, the same one who managed to get her into the cave. Turns out she just couldn't handle it, and they'd abandoned the attempt entirely. I go through the situation with them and tell them I am leaving the cave to be the call-out guy. They ask me to go get an SRT kit, basically just ropes and a harness, in case any other of the caving club needed it to climb back up. So I do just that. A little while later I head back with the gear, which they did not have all of, and I had to borrow off other cavers who were luckily at the same campsite. I get back to the cave, and the others are leaving, albeit rather slowly as it is a difficult entrance, and climbing out is considerably harder than climbing in. They all manage to get out, but lo and behold, the panicking girl gets stuck. And with 2 leaders trapped below her, she is blocking the entrance. We harness her up and I rig up an anchor to try and secure her on a rope in case she falls, but she is wedged in there tight and isn't in the right frame of mind to get moving. Then I get the news from the others below that the cave is starting to fill because of the rain. After what seems like an eternity of them nicely talking to this panicking girl, telling her she is doing great and she will be fine, she is getting worse at this stage. I freak out. I shout at her that she needs to get herself together and get out of the cave because 2 others are stuck behind her. It kind of works, and she nearly stops having a panic attack, not entirely, but stops hyperventilating, which just makes her more stuck. She still won't climb out though, so against all common sense, I lie down into the hole and grab her by the harness and pull her up and out of the cave. After that, I told the club they needed to get their stuff together and stop being cowboys, but I haven't gone back to them since. Because their foolishness straight up nearly got 2 team leaders killed.